Hey friends, what's up? So yesterday the version 2.0 of SvelteKit was released, so I want to go over the release notes and want to show you some cool features. Also don't worry, because there are no major breaking API changes. The major reason for the version bump to SvelteKit 2 is because they upgraded their Vite version to 5. And if you don't know, Vite is one of the backbones of every front-end JavaScript framework today. It's behind all your popular front-end frameworks, so it's used by Astro, Nux, SvelteKit, Solistart, QuickCity, Redwood.js, and even Remix recently switched to using Vite. So Vite is just an incredible ecosystem that allowed us to have all of these nice things. But that being said, there are also some cool features I want to go over, like shallow routing, so you can make Instagram with SvelteKit. You're going to see what I mean by that in a bit. But before I get started, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also support me by becoming a patron. Alright friends, so let's look at the release notes, and all of these links are going to be included in the description. For most of you that are using SvelteKit, this is going to be really painless because there are actually no major breaking API changes, but of course there is always someone that is using one of these features that got changed in some way, so I encourage you to go through these release notes. So the first thing you can do, you can run the automatic migration script by saying npx svelte-migrate SvelteKit-2, and this is going to try to run a migration automatically for you. So let's look at the first breaking change, which is redirect and error are no longer thrown by you. So in the past, when you use this error, you would have to say throw error, which was kind of confusing to remember this, right? So now it's actually an improvement in my opinion. So now you can just say error. And you have these two helpers, is HTTP error and is redirect. If the error or redirect is thrown inside a try-catch block, even though they say here that you shouldn't do this, but it's your code base, you can do whatever you want. So if you need that, you can use it from @svelte.js/kit. So the next change is path is required when setting cookies. So now when you set a cookie, you always need to set the path. So that's basically it. And this is an interesting one. Top level promises are no longer awaited. I don't even know if you're aware of this before, unless you use streaming. So in SvelteKit 1, if the top level properties of the object returned from a load function were promises, they were automatically awaited. So now as of SvelteKit 2, it no longer differentiates between top level and non-top level promises. So now you can use the blocking fetch by using await if you have a single promise, or you can use await promise.all. So yeah, that's it. And let's also look at some other changes. So GoTo has this change. It no longer accepts external URLs. So if you want to pass an external URL to GoTo, use the window.location API. That's basically it. So there is just these other change paths are now relative by default. So if you change something with this, maybe you should look into that, right? And basically all of these other changes aren't that relevant. Server fetches are not trackable anymore. Preload code arguments must be prefixed with base. Resolve path has been removed. So if you use this, maybe you should look into this. There is some improved error handling. Dynamic environment variables cannot be used during pre-rendering. So it says here that if you're pre-rendering, instead of using the dynamic environment variables, use the static modules instead. So they renamed form and data in the user enhanced callback. So if you read it here, they just renamed form to form element and they renamed data to form data. And I actually like this change. It's a lot more consistent and clear. So here is something about forms containing file inputs must use multipart form data, something about tsconfig. Get request no longer throws errors, with preprocessing no longer exported from this thing. And here they just list what dependencies got upgraded, and that's basically it. As you can see, there are no major breaking API changes. There's really just a lot of improvements, and one of those improvements is shallow routing, which we're going to look at next. Alright friends, so let's talk about shallow routing. So what is shallow routing? It sounds more intimidating than it is. Basically, shallow routing just means that you can now create Instagram-like experiences in your app. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, when I go here, let's imagine this is some Instagram feed, right? And now when I click on this image, it's going to go to this photos/10 route, which is the ID of the image. But this really isn't that convenient. So now I have to go back, and on Instagram the experience is a lot nicer. When you click on an image, it's actually going to change the URL in the browser and it's going to open it in a model here where you have all of those comments, likes, and etc. And now when you're done and you close the model, it's just going to go back to where you were before without doing a navigation. That's basically all there is to shallow routing. So if you look at the shallow routing docs, sometimes it's useful to create history entries without navigating. For example, you might want to show a model dialog that the user can dismiss by navigating back. This is particularly available on mobile devices where swipe gestures are often more natural than interacting directly with the UI. And now SvelteKit makes this possible using the push state and replace state functions. So here is the most simplest example we can look at. So now when you open a model in this example, you can use push state. So when you pass it an empty string, that means the root. And now you can pass it whatever data you want, like show model true or banana, right? And now this is going to become part of your page store. So this is going to become available under page.state. And now you can check if this exists, and then you can use the history API. You can say history.back. Now when you close the model, the user is going to be returned where they started. And basically that's it. So I'm going to actually show you next a simple demo how all of this works. But again, all of these links are going to be in the description if you want to read more about it. Alright friends, so let's try to make this simple as possible. So here is the feed here. I'm just using a regular SvelteKit app using the newest SvelteKit 2.0. So I just have a simple and basic loop here over some images that I made an API for. So I'm using this Pixum API. I'm just looping over it 20 times so I get this unique URL and then I return it as JSON. So now if I go to localhost 5173, I can say API images and then I get this JSON back, and that's basically it. So now I can use this in my other route. So for example, to fetch and loop over the post here, inside of plus page server TS, inside of routes, I just fetch from this API/images and return the thumbnails as JSON. And also when I navigate to this image using this unique ID in the URL, I can do this inside my other route. So here where I have this ID and a plus page.server.ts file, I can just get the ID from params.id. Now I can again fetch my images, I can get the response, and I can filter the image that I want. Basically, this is the most basic SvelteKit app. And I'm also going to include a link to the REPL in the description if you want to play around with it. Alright friends, so the first thing we have to do, if we go back to our feed, we need to prevent the default behavior when you click on this link, because we actually don't want to navigate. We just want to do something else. In this case, we want to show the model. So back to our code here where my A link is, I can just use an onClick function. Actually, I can just say prevent default here. And now we can make a show model function. So we can go here back to our code. Let's make an async function, show model, and that's basically it. Alright, so inside of here, we have to do a couple of things. So first we have to get the URL, and then we have to get the result of the load function. So we have to return the data from it, right? And then we're going to create a new history entry. And that's basically it. So let's get the URL first. We can destructure ref from e current target, and I can just say HTML anchor element. And let's pass the event here, which should be of type event. And that's basically it. Alright, so now we have the URL. So now let's get the result of the load function. So I can say const result equals await. So now we can use this function, preload data, so we can programmatically get the data from the load function in Svelte, and now we just need to pass it ref. Cool. And let's actually log this out. So we can say result, and then let's open the developer tools. So now when you click on it, we get this interesting object. So here is type loaded, we get the status, and we get the data here. So here is our image with the ID, source, and the alt. So this is the same thing as what would happen when we navigate to that route. So now back in our code, we have to create a new history entry. So now we can say if result type is loaded and result status is okay, so 200. And then we're going to use this other API. We can say push state, and then we can pass it the ref this time, and then you can pass whatever data you need. So I'm going to say selected, and then we want to use the data from the result. So we can say result.data. And in case something goes wrong, let's try navigating. So to do that, we can say go to, and then we can pass the link to which it should navigate. And that's basically it. So let's actually log this out. And as you can see, we already automatically imported go to, preload data, and push state from $app navigation. But now we can actually look at this data in the store. So here is one of my favorite snippets that I always love to use. And I also have an entire video on how I made these snippets. I can use pre, and now I can start typing page. Again, I'm going to auto import it. So this is a store. As you can see at the top, it's imported from $app/stores. And to use this as a store, you have to use $. So we can now actually see whatever we get here as the output. So in this case here, if I zoom in at our route, we can see that we have this empty state here. but let's actually go to something else. And now we can see that this state selected should be updated. So now here we have any information that you need, which is the image with the ID, alt, and the source. Alright friends, so let's actually show the model. So back in our code, I'm going to use this model component. Let me first comment this out. So now if I start typing model, it should be auto imported. So let me just do this, and we can see at the top here it's imported from routes. Alright, cool. So now I can also bind the value of the model. I can say bind model, and we can also use the close event listener. So you can say on close, and this is something specific to the dialog element, and then we can say close model. And now we can create two things. First, we can create a function and say function close model. And then let's just create a reference to the model here. So we can say let model HTML dialog element if you're using TypeScript, which is optional, of course. And then this is it. So now this is something really interesting. So we can actually pass this plus page.svelte component here. So from photos/id plus page.svelte, we can actually use this component here as is, because we're not actually using it for navigation, but we just want to use it as a regular Svelte component here. And this is so cool, because this is something I actually never thought about before that you could do, which makes complete sense, because pages in SvelteKit are just Svelte components, right? So this maybe opens a lot of possibilities for you. So let me just go here, and what you're going to do actually, let's go first to the top, so we can import this just like a regular Svelte component. We can say import. You can name this whatever you want, it's really not important. I'm going to name this image, and I'm going to say from. So we can go to photos, ID, and then we can say plus page.svelte. Alright, so now back here in our code, we can now actually use it. But first we actually have to check if we have something in our page.state, right? So we can use this if block. We can use the page store, so we can say page state selected. And then we can use our component. So if I go here, I can say image. And now we can just pass it props because it's just a component, right? How awesome is that, right? So you're aware how we have this export late data, right? In our components, right? Well, basically that's it. That's it, right? How cool is this? So you can say data equals $. So this is where having this data in our page store comes in. So you can say page.state.selected. That's it, friends. How simple is that? Alright, but now we actually need to pop open the model. So now here where we push the state, we can just use this API. So we have a reference to the model. I can say model, show model, and that's it. And now when I close the model, remember I need to use the history API. So the only thing I have to do is history.back. Alright, so let's save everything, and everything should now work. I'm even going to close this. So now if I refresh this for good measure, so remember, now when I click on this, this should prevent the default action of navigating, right? And it should open a model, and that's it. So let's see if this works. How beautiful is this, friends? Alright, so how do I exit this? Well, by default, if you're using the dialog element and the model, you could just press escape. So now this should return us to our previous URL, if you remember. So let's see the moment of truth if I press escape. How beautiful is this, friends? So now we can go to any other image, see if it works. Photos 13. Now I'm going to press escape. I'm done with this. And you can imagine this being like on Instagram. You have likes, comments, and etc. Anything you want here, right? Now we're going to press escape. Boom. We're back where we were. Ah, how beautiful is this, friends? Alright, friends, so the last thing I want to cover is the types. If you're following along and you're using TypeScript, you're probably going to have some errors here regarding this page store, because you actually have to include these types. And if we look at the shell routing docs, here in the API section, they actually tell you that you can make page state type safe by declaring an app page.state interface in source/app.dts. So let me actually show you how I've done that. So here is that file. You can, of course, use Control-P in your VS Code as you should, and you can just start typing app.dts. Boom. Now we can open this, and here I just have this simple interface defined. So I said interface page state selected, image ID alt source, and boom, done. That's how you do it. Really simple. So if you like what you're seeing, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also support me by becoming a patron. Thank you for watching, and catch you in the next one. Peace.